please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would like to remind us of our guiding principles and while there's no action tonight in the deliberations we're about to have tonight, and they are we raising the bar? Are we honoring the past but not living in the past? Are we building connections with outside partners? And is the decision-making process positively impacting diversity, equity, and inclusion? Right, tonight has one item on it, and that is a public hearing and presentation on our biennial review and modifications to the budget. So at this time, I will open the public hearing, and I will turn this over to Noah Crocker, who will give us a presentation. Maybe I should give him the presentation, then I'll open the public hearing. We'll ring that gavel again one more time later.
I just want to ensure we are recording, right, Janine?
Yes.
Okay. So as established by RCW 35A 34130, a mid-biennial review of the biennial budget is required. This review shall occur no sooner than 8 months after the start of the biennium, which would be September 1st, and no later than the close of the fiscal year, December 31st. The city has focused its criteria for the mid-year modifications to those items that are corrections, required, and are large capital with budgetary impacts. The budget ordinance will reflect the following. A budget amendment with City Council and staff for actions that have already been taken, totaling about $4 million. New expenditure requests totaling roughly $7 million. And revenue adjustments for roughly $15 million. We have identified in our staff report all the projects that it relates to in the comprehensive plan for the council as well as the public. And to start the presentation, I want to turn our council's attention to the very first item, which is I want to remind the council as well as the public the process that we've gone through so far. So we began the process as of December, where departments were asked to review their budget and submit to the finance department based on the 3 criteria that we outlined. Once the departments responded, the finance director reviewed the budget status reports with the mayor. Departments were consulted on possible modifications to our mid-year biennial budget. And then we have brought those recommendations forward as part of the mid-biennial budget amendments. Tonight is October 17th. We met with the Finance Committee first and went into great detail on the modifications being proposed. We are holding our public hearing tonight on this biennial budget amendment at the workstation session. And then next week on the 24th, we will have the ordinance presented for adoption, as well as another public hearing on the mid-biennial adjustments. Next week, we will also have a public hearing on the revenue and sources hearing, which will lead to our 2024 property tax levy. So with that, I want to lead the council through first summary level documents. In your packet there, you should have a document that looks like this on the screen. I'll do my best to kind of walk through while you all have handouts. And we'll do the highlights first in the summary, and then we'll move and talk about the income statement. And as I walk through this presentation, I'm going to ask the mayor to comment on certain adjustments and projects and of the like. And I don't know if you had something to start with, Rob, or if you want me to keep going.
And I just want to point out, too, that in your packet was a second document with far more detail. This is a 10,000 feet, and the document with the green column where it has the yeses on it is the same with the fund sources and far more detail on it. So we're going to keep this at a high level, and if you've got questions, you're more than welcome to ask them as we go through this. So the first few related to current expense.
Mayor, may I just interject real quick?
Yes, you may.
Just for the ease of understanding the document, I don't know if it came out as well on the print, but on my screen, there are some items that are highlighted in bold. So if you look at the current expense category here, you'll see some dark bold ones. Those all refer to new requests. All the unbolted are items that we would call our cleanup items, meaning these are items that actions council have already taken. They're adjustments that were already required with grants and loans and projects. So we categorize those as cleanup, and so the bold are new requests.
Yep, thank you for that, Noah. And so in the first handful there, then the cleanups, we did the Crawford Road abatement. It depleted our abatement funds, and this is just replenishing those so that if we need to address another property, that we're ready to do that. Same way with the derelict vessels. We expended a large amount of money this past year, largely got reimbursed from DNR, and this is just replenishing that fund again so that we hope not to have to seize any vessels, but if we need to, they're getting more and more expensive to do, so we want to be able to react to that. We've been adding staff to our building department, but we've also got a number of consultant contracts to fill and to backfill, and that $391,000, it represents the truing up of those contract inspection services for the coming year. Some cleanup action for the housing action plan that trailed into this year, even though that body of work got done last year, and that was largely grant funded. And then, as we have an ENR fund, we make payments to it, estimating what vehicles and equipment's going to cost. And as we go through our budget process, when we go to purchase those vehicles, things are costing more than we've saved for. So at least we're not, looking at $1 million worth of or more in equipment purchases that we haven't saved anything for. But this just trues up and cleans up the actual purchase prices. Councilmember Lucarelli asked for some additional funds for chimes and lights. This year it's going to need to be across the street, and I think we've got a mobile stage and some other things that we need to pay for this year, and so we're asking for some additional money to make that happen. The housing Kitsap, we already have $70,000 in the budget, and that was for that house that I wanted to see us build. And as we got close to applying for that grant, we learned that because we would be building the house, even though the labor was volunteer, all of the specialty trades would have been a prevailing wage. And it got to the point when we were estimating the cost, we could buy a house cheaper than building one due to our prevailing wage requirements. And then we would have had to done all the volunteer labor too. So it turned out to be not a good deal for us to try to do that. So I backed away from that. Not saying in the future we wouldn't maybe look at trying to buy a house, but at this time I just don't. We've got so many other pans in the fire. For now, I've backed away from that, and that opportunity to apply for that grant passed this past June. So, Councilmember Dean, you have a question about that?
Yeah. So the prevailing wages would have applied to like the job super, but
the electrical, your roofer,
sure.
all your
Okay.
volunteers can only
specialty-
all the volunteers can only do so much.
Right, okay, got it.
And so, but with this I just want to be transparent. This $45,000, while it's housing Kitsap, it's something different. We collect $60,000 a year, so $120,000 in this biennium, and so I want to deploy some of these dollars. We've got a number of projects out there, like the Salvation Army's Women's Shelter that's going to be up by the county admin building that they're working on opening that. We've got the Mike House, and then there's another small one too that we can likely in the future help with some operational costs, but they've got to get opened first. So this represents, as we've done in the past, home improvement projects for low-income families, and to keep these low-income families in their homes, make their homes habitable, and prevent them from becoming homeless. And there's 5 for this $45,000 funds 5 projects. Mostly windows and doors, exterior windows and doors, and one of them is a heating system. So, crucial things going into winter these families to have their homes in livable conditions. The 15,000, we had this in the budget the last biennium, and we were having some challenges with the vendor that was doing our key card system. So we didn't move forward with that, and then we didn't fund it in this budget. And we found a new vendor to do those services. This is just to add some additional key card points within City Hall, and then in turn also go to a keyless entry system over at the 720 building. We had a presentation here about a month ago from KEDA and the One Kitsap campaign that they're putting out there and raising investments from private business, and they've also asked local government to increase their contribution. So it would take our contribution to KEDA from 10 to 20, which would be in line with what Bremerton pays. Not Bremerton, Bainbridge Island, the last city. Bremerton is, I believe, increasing their contribution to 40,000, and I think Paulsbo is going to be at 15,000. Nick, so we've got a cybersecurity grant that IT department has obtained. So this will just be authority for us to accept that grant and expend those dollars. And the fleet telemetrics is going to allow us to manage the mileage and the maintenance of our vehicles. Noah and his team and the Public Works manager are meeting with this consultant next week, but this will allow us to do some automated management of our vehicles, from mileage to gas to maintenance. We've got a couple, the next couple are related to our police department. One is so that our police department can be more responsive in their background checks and give us some additional options to allow us to be quicker, because if we are not quick enough, somebody else, many times these applicants are applying in other jurisdictions, and if they get a job offer from them first, that's where they go to work and not for us.
But what does that look like, Mr. Mayor? A quicker background check?
I'll let the chief address that. It's the polygraph, the background checks is what that is. So
Sure. So there's a number of vendors, but depending on the volume that they are dealing with, this provides us the ability to go to other vendors that may cost a little bit more, but allow us to get it done in 2 weeks as opposed to 4 or 6. We've primarily gone with one company that's based over in the I-5 corridor, and there are some others that we can go to, but because they deal in volume, they're a little cheaper. Unfortunately, they're significantly further out to get these things done, and we can't compete with agencies that have in-house background investigators.
answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to get talent as soon as you can, because everybody's competing for that. I'm
That's
sure we've all
exactly what this is.
experienced
The next 25 reps, there's a new law enforcement academy down in the Tri-Cities, and we've done some analysis. If we can get somebody into that academy sooner, we want the ability to get them there, and we're required to pay them their travel time, which is going to be overtime back and forth, but that's cheaper than paying somebody, less expensive than paying somebody to sit around for 6 more months while we wait for the local academy to open up. So just authorizing some dollars. So if a seat opens up in that academy down in the Tri-Cities area, we'll put one of our new officers in that academy. But our first choice, of course, is going to be Burien if we can get them in there. Next couple are just some supplies. I want to touch on the Inclusion Commission. We've got our DEI work that our Inclusion Commission is doing. At their last meeting, they're asking that we do some survey work, for all of our workforce, and we really lack the in-house expertise to do that body of work. I'm hoping this isn't going to be that expensive. We haven't procured it yet or selected anybody yet, but it should be plenty of money to get the job done and continue this valuable body of work. Unfortunately, the heating system at the library needs some repairs, and that's our building. So I wish Transit would just buy it from us so that they could pay for the repairs, but they haven't. We've got I don't know, remember the emergency we had about a month ago with the toilet filling up the police department, and got that shut off? This represents replacing. We want to go to electronic flush toilets in the city hall and low flow, and we're not 100% sure. We think that we can retrofit the toilets we have, and if we can, it'll be much less expensive. This represents if we had to replace all the toilets in City Hall, and because we can't retrofit the ones we have. So we have one that's broken that we're gonna order the parts and try it to see if we can retrofit it. And if it does, then we'll retrofit others. And if we don't, then we've got the budget authority to we're asking all of our citizens to save water. And we should probably be doing it ourselves, but it's a lot of money, I know, for a bunch of toilets, but.
And it's an electric flush
You know,
system?
if you've seen it, the sensors where
Oh,
you
sure.
don't.
Okay.
What we're having
yeah.
is touchless, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're just having a serious problem with people, they aren't kind to the flusher, and then they break them, and then the water continues to run, and then it runs all over the floor and causes us damage in the building, so.
Just for clarification, this is just hardware?
This, what you see right here is all in, correct? 25 grand was all in, Dennis? That was my understanding too. That was likely paying somebody to come in and do that. And we've been talking for a number of years about water bottle fillers, and we're getting ready to do some interior improvements to the building and carpet and paint. And so we want to get the existing drinking fountains off the wall, install the new ones, so that when we get painted in here that you couldn't tell that there was something else on the wall before. You want to speak to the catch-up payments there for ER&R, Noah?
On Fund 002?
In 00, yeah, I'm down to 002, yes.
Yeah, and I guess before we leave, so the mayor just went through the general fund, the current expense fund. Just want to open up any questions on anything that he covered before we move on to the next fund?
What, is the catch-up something that we didn't project?
Yeah, so when we initially set up the ENR, we were going with the information we had when we bought pieces of equipment, heavy equipment, vehicles, and what we found is those early estimates to seed the fund were very low. And so when we actually came to actually purchase it, they almost tripled what we originally estimated. So we budgeted like 200,000. That's what we initially seeded the fund, and we actually purchased it like for 600,000. So this is the catch up to what we initially under budgeted.
Excavators, loaders, street sweepers, Vector trucks are really expensive, and we've been buying them.
So you'll see the ER&R catch-up payments in all our operations funds for the appropriate vehicles for that fund.
Satisfied with, you understand that now? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So moving on to the Fund 002, you've got the catch-up payments related to that fund. And then there was a request from the street committee and a couple council members that went to the AWC conference. They saw some flashing radar signs, and we have some out there. And Tony Lang, before he left, did some research and found some signs that don't require grounding. The current ones that we have, and most of them on the market, have a ground wire. And if they have a ground wire, then they require an L&I permit, and we have a contract with the county, and the county has to do it for us. So it's fairly laborious to move a simple sign that just has a bolt and a ground wire, but that's the rules that we have. So these particular signs don't have a ground wire, so our crews will be able to move them. They have some additional it's 2 signs. They'll have the ability to capture data for us. So when we get that complaint that everybody's doing 70 miles an hour on this street, or 50 miles an hour on this street, we can put these signs up and really capture the data and say, yes, 3 people did go 45 miles an hour on this street, but by and large, or maybe everybody is doing 50 miles an hour and we've got a serious problem. But we'll have data and not have to hire traffic consultants to capture this data for us. One other feature to these particular signs is they have a bright flashing white. So if you're exceeding the speed limit too much, it gives you the impression that you got a photo taken of you. it doesn't, but
That's how you figure it out.
so you figure it out. But anyway, it's just an added feature that it comes with. So down on, and moving on, down at Rockwell, near Rockwell Park, the pathway has some undermining on the beach side, and we need to do some repairs down there. And we had a street truck that was involved in an accident. It was an older truck. We didn't get much from the insurance proceeds, and so there aren't enough funds in the ENR. There were no funds in the ENR fund for it, and we're needing to buy a new 3/4 ton truck. That truck is used to haul a fuel, a diesel fuel in a tank around to our various generators. So it's mission critical for our team out in Public Works.
Mayor, that's a replacement vehicle.
It's really, in this budget, it is not viewed that way, and that's why it's called out, because it was something that we'd surplused and replaced, but because of the growth of our operation, we needed a pickup. And so this Public Works said, but we don't want to get rid of, I know we got it replaced, but we don't want to get rid of it because we use it for this particular purpose. Then it got in an accident, and because of its age, we didn't really get anything for it, but we still need that truck. So it's really a true classification of it. It's a new truck.
So we surplused one that then got in an accident?
No, we didn't surplus. It was intended to be surplused, okay? And we bought a new truck, and our practice is when we replace something, we get rid of the old truck, okay? But Public Works said, but this truck is unique. It's a 3/4 ton truck. We don't have very many of these, and we want to keep it, and we're using it for this one purpose. And then it got in an accident, and so there were no funds in the ENR fund to add to the insurance proceeds to replace it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to hit on that point, anytime we actually add a vehicle to the fleet, that's another vehicle actually, the count goes up. So originally it was replaced, we call it key for key. So we take the old one, we'd surplus it. Normally we would have sold it off and we would never see that truck again. But at the time, Public Works said, hey, we need this vehicle for seasonals and for this other use, but it's no longer a part of the fund. It's no longer part of the payments. It's just kind of out there. So we always say, well, this isn't part of it. If anything happens to it, it's literally zero. And so then when it got wrecked, all of a sudden the new Public Works Department said, hey, we really need that type of vehicle. And we said, okay, that was a different decision under the other administration. So that's why it's a request to actually add in the vehicle to the fleet again.
Thank you.
And Noah, do you want to speak to the working capital policy and the funding we're doing there?
Yeah, so and you'll see this note on all our operational funds. We have, from our financial policies, we have two kind of reserve type policies. We have our stabilization funds, which are truly separate funds, which we contribute to, which have defined events in which the council could act to tap those funds to support the city. Then we also have the working capital, which is a policy within our operational funds. And the policy says that we'll maintain a minimum of 12.5% and work towards 25%. And so that's really 45 to 90 days of working capital. And so each biennial or each budget cycle, we try to move the needle and get closer to our 25% goal, which would be that 90 days of working capital. And so this is another opportunity to contribute towards our working capital goal and move the needle slightly towards 25%. Now, we don't get there with this one. I think we get closer to 20% for the street fund. And I think we get closer with all our other funds. But the point is that each budget, we try to move it a few percentage points, and then with the intent over time, we'll get to our 25% goal.
And Noah, roughly what percentage, 12.5 is the minimum, 25 is the goal. Where are we at right now?
We're about 17%. So we did take a step forward in this budget cycle, and we were trying to take another step mid-biennial, looking at all the available resources that we have. We thought that made sense.
And there, at the bottom of the page, is just something that came in late. I don't know if any of you have had your homeowners policy renew lately and the size of increases that you're seeing, but that's also, with all of the natural disasters and things happening out there in the world, insurance premiums are going up, and we also saw a significant increase to our insurance policy also at the city. Moving on to page 2, we've got, I'll let Noah speak to those next 2 columns in 109 and 206.
Yeah, so you'll see this request also throughout this document. We are requesting that we, as a city, and we've already taken steps before, so we've already talked about this and we've already taken steps, but we've had a policy or practice or goal to fund at least 1 year of debt service payments for every one of our obligations. And for example, Marina Pump Station, we have already funded our 1 year of debt service payments in our sewer debt service fund that's set aside as we kind of move forward. So we've talked about this for a few years. This biennial budget, or excuse me, this mid-biennial review takes that big step to say, hey, all our debt's coming online this year. It's time to actually pre-fund all of them. And so you'll see this through our enterprise funds as well as our governmental funds, that we're taking a big step forward to pre-fund all our obligations, at least 1 year of debt service payments. Now for this particular one, City Hall debt, it only says partial because at the time we set this, we weren't able to get a full 1 year of payment with the revenues we have adopted in the budget. We get there with that Tremont piece, but we didn't get there with the City Hall. So that's only a partial funding. And you'll see this later on in some of our enterprises. So I'll come back and talk about which ones we've 100% funded. But essentially all our enterprise funds, we are going to be able to 100% fund those for 1 year of debt service payments. And I'll pull this slide up real quick, not to shift gears too much, but the reason we've talked about this is because we knew, that we were doing a lot of projects and we were taking on a lot of debt. And so if you can see the screen, I'll try to zoom in a little bit. This shows the amount of debt on an annual basis by each of our enterprises. So you see for our water fund, our water enterprise, we will owe roughly $2 million in debt service payments. Sewer, roughly $1.1 million in debt service payments. Our storm enterprise, $230,000 in debt service payments. And for our facilities and streets, roughly $1.3 million in debt service payments on an annual basis. So the reason the Finance Committee and the Council have been forward-thinking and forward-looking is because they saw the debt come down the line, and we want to take sound financial steps to shore up the city's position against any downward risk in revenues, anything that could address us in a negative impact on our debt side.
Important to note too. Go ahead. Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, did you want to continue, or?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So is it like prepaying the debts, or are
No,
they?
we're just setting aside money in case there's a downturn in the economy,
So
that we have
where
enough money to.
Are we saving it? Are we getting any interest on it?
Yes, we will. Yeah, the funds will be set into each of their debt service funds. And so you'll see right here, you have Fund 206, the Governmental Debt Service Fund. Those monies will be placed in that fund. They'll earn interest, accrue, and remain in the fund until its final payment, and then we'll release that for the final payment.
Councilmember Clausen?
Yeah, just for clarification and for the council's information, Noah says we've taken on a lot of debt. That is when we get, for example, these public works trust funds where they're 2% loan, that's a debt, but it's a good investment into improving the quality of the city.
Yeah, and we're extremely conservative. What's a lot of debt to us, we are scratching the surface of the debt borrowing capabilities of the city. But myself and none of our finance committee members would ever be comfortable with borrowing to the limits. And the City Hall borrowing and the Marina Pump Station borrowing are longer term, or 20 years, and I think a 15-year is on the Marina Pump Station. I think maybe it's a 20.
No, I think Marina's 30-year.
It's a 30-year.
Yeah, it's a longer one.
But all these 2% loans we've been getting for various sewer and water capital projects, they're all they're 2% loans, and they're very short term. So it makes for a fairly large payment, but they're going to be gone in 4 or 5 years. Tremont was a 10-year borrowing, and we're 7 years into it. So I think in the next biennium, we'll retire that debt, or darn close. Noah's rolling around in his head the day.
I think 2032, it was a 15-year borrowing, but we are.
15, was it a 15?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we are substantially through that one.
Yeah, so we're at least halfway done paying for it anyway, so. And answer your questions related to debt and what we're doing there. So we're basically setting aside a year's worth of payments so that in case there's a downturn in the economy, we're not scrambling to react to that. And so we want to have a year's worth of payments, in the bank,
And then the next item here for the governmental fund, that is actually the debt service payments due this 2024.
You ready to move on? Okay, the next one is the capital construction, and that represents, there's an office building that is likely going to come on the market before the end of the year. We're currently leasing two office suites in a building near City Hall, and this represents money to do due diligence on that office building. If everything checks out with the building and we get an appraisal on it, then we would come before the city council then to take action to potentially purchase that office building. And what this is showing, we're funding with cash the purchase of that building and the due diligence. So, but the first step is going to be the due diligence. This is putting money in the budget so that we can react quickly to do that due diligence and then come back to you with the details where that office building is. So it'll allow us to get out of those lease spaces, allow us some room to grow a little bit, and provide some much needed parking because our employees are contributing to the parking challenges downtown too. So with those parking spaces, like our other City Hall lots and spaces, would be available after hours on the weekends to the public. So moving on to the street capital construction, I'll hit just the highlighted, the 97,000 for the Blueberry and Salmonberry represents some developer funds that were paid. That gives us the authority to expend those dollars on the design, including those in the design. The Goldenrod street lighting came from the street committee. They had a complaint about inadequate lighting. It's out in the Sydney South area, and PAC went out there and looked and said, yeah, they could use some more street lights, and that's what this represents. We've got the Safe Routes to School out there by Sydney Glen design. We've got Tremont Phase 2 and 3, which is the doing the conceptual designs for the lights at Sydney and Tremont, or where it turns to Lund, and then at Port Orchard Boulevard, and what that would look like is a future project. And then we've got that 166 2A design, which is that right-of-way acquisition and doing the conceptual designs there across from Bravo Terrace, and where potentially Multicare wants to build a clinic there, and we need to have the right-of-way and the design, at least the concepts, so that they can move forward what we would want them to build there. And then we've got the 166 Highway 166 design dollars too, which is the Bay Street project. Moving over to water operations, we've got you can see a number of things that are just clean up there. The big one, once again, pre-funding our debt, that's $700,000. The working capital, the $200,000. And contributions to the stabilization fund. Any questions on water operations there? I think they're all pretty self-explanatory.
Mayor, I'd like to make one comment again on the pre-funded debt. So when we get to our enterprises, we use what we adopted in the capital improvement plan, and how those projects were to be funded between operation rates or capital facility charges that we receive when builders pay. So you'll see this both in the water operations 411, that we have contributions coming from operations or rate revenue for pre-funding, but we also have money coming from our capital fund. That's the CFC money. The other $494,000 Again, these are all based on each project and each project's allocation of whether this is development paying for growth or the ratepayers paying for the kind of current infrastructure. So I think that's something good to mention, that setting this money aside while we have the money from all this growth is a good time to do that as well.
Ready to move on to water capital? All right, so the first big one there is a negative number, the $637,000. We had started on a project in the Sydney South area. We've got lower than desirable water pressure in that area, and we were going to do a booster pump in that area. And as they started to get into that design, they felt that the Well 13 project, when it comes online, could change the dynamics in that area, and so that this would not be a good, something is needed there, but it may not be this booster pump. And so we would hate to spend $600,000 and then 5 years from now we don't need this booster pump. We need something else, you know, and that we don't know, so that is yet to be designed. So we're going to hold off on this project and make those necessary improvements later as we bring Well 13 online. We have just some cleanup. Our water main replacement, we used all of those funds to complete the Shroof water main project that was just recently completed, and this is just putting dollars back in for other water main replacement projects. We've got a project for the pre-construction of well number 7, which is at the bottom of Port Orchard Boulevard. And then we've got on the road diet project we're going to do in front of Cedar Heights. You'll see here $100,000 for some water line, and a larger number later on in this presentation for sewer lines. So as we redo that street, we want to make sure that we have all new pipes in the ground, and that you know, a year or two after putting down brand new blacktop, we're not cutting it up to put utilities in the ground. Any questions on the remainder of that page? Okay, we'll move on to sewer operations. Once again, we've got ER&R payments and replacements. We've got the debt and the working capital, and then stabilization contributions. So no same theme going on there. But when we get into the capital, you'll see the 500 that I had referred to earlier for that'll be the new force main that eventually will tie in all the way down to Ruby Creek. We know we need a larger force main in that area, and we're going to put a segment of it in the ground there on Pottery as we're doing that Safe Route to Schools project. We've got a grant, and then a loan for the design of a new lift station down on Bay Street near the Ford dealership. We're down there at this time, matter of fact, putting some pumps in that one to nurse it along, but that station needs to be completely rebuilt. And then there's another $350,000 being put to get us 100% design, and that project total design is about $700,000. There's already some money in the budget for the Ruby Creek lift station, and we're in negotiation with Kitsap Transit for a reimbursement agreement. They're going to, they're telling us, and I take them at their word, that they're going to pay for that design. But even if they didn't, we need that design for a future project. Let's see here. Moving on to our capital purchases. Are we ready to move on to the capital purchases at the bottom of the page? All right, so when we get into personnel, you'll see that we've got some new police personnel, and so we're needing a couple of police cars there. We need an admin vehicle for Public Works. We're also needing that truck that we spoke to earlier. That's that same dollar amount, and a couple of other pickups for Public Works, because we're going to add some personnel in that department.
Mr. Mayor, are any of those electric vehicles?
You know, we were having a conversation about that this evening. We have 4 Ford Lightnings on order for a year and a half.
Been on order for a year
for a
and a half?
year and a half. And we still don't have them. And so, it's getting critical to have pickups, so we might pivot to buying a couple of heavier duty trucks, maybe F-250s. Dennis hasn't heard this yet, so. But he's so new, we can tell him anything and he'll believe us. No, Dennis is doing great. We're going to evaluate that. Because we need some trucks, and I know there's a mandate. In the light duty trucks, we have to buy the electric ones, but I think we have some need too for some heavier duty trucks, as we heard earlier, to haul equipment and do some other things. So, maybe one or two of these gets turned into a gas or a diesel truck, so that we can deal with our needs today versus waiting a year or two for another truck. So, personnel requests. So earlier the plans examiner position listed separately up at top. That's a cleanup, because you previously you approved that position, but we hadn't paid for it yet. So now we're paying for it. And then the chief came in with 3 personnel requests. He came in asking for 2 police officers and a civilian manager for the civilian staff down there. And as we talk through that and talk to our neighboring jurisdictions and how they're managing their the management structures of their police departments, what we've settled on here is adding 1 police officer. And we're calling it a deputy chief right now, but that title is going to change. And the reason we've done that is because that's what we have in our org chart. And some jurisdictions call them lieutenants, some call them captains, some call them commanders, some call them deputy chiefs. We could call them a janitor. The important thing is the job description and the salary is correct. And so we believe we've got that correct. And we'll be probably, chief's advocating that this position be a commander, and our current deputy chief also be called a commander, and we'll have 1 for operations, which is supervising the folks out in the field, our patrol officers. The second one, the administrative function, which is that civilian workforce, the evidence room, and the detectives. And then, in succession planning, we've talked about every few years, potentially, if those folks stayed in those positions, rotating. And, someday when our chief goes to retire in 30 years, that, we've trained somebody to step into that role. Or we've trained, helped somebody grow and become a police chief somewhere else. So, that's what we've pivoted to in this request, is adding an additional second in command and having 2 what we're calling deputy chiefs at this time, and then 1 more patrol officer. So we're in recruitment on the 2. We've hired, while they're still in training, everybody but the 2 positions you authorized at the beginning of this year. We're still recruiting for those 2, and this would add a 3rd. So there's definitely progress happening there on that front. The next 3 positions are related to the water utility, and we have a mandate by next October to inspect our service lines for lead pipes. And we know in our newer developments that we don't have any lead pipes, and we don't believe we have any in the older parts of the city, but we have to physically inspect them. And that's going to involve digging a hole and looking at some service lines, and so we have to have that done by next October, those inspections. Then in turn, so if we don't hire 2 people to do that work, so it's a 2-man operation. One's probably going to be on the Vector truck, and I won't get into the details how they do that, but if I don't hire a couple of people, then we're going to take people away from doing the duties that we're already falling behind on, which is, filling potholes, crack sealing the streets, repairing sidewalks, sweeping the streets. So we don't have the capacity to add this work without adding 2 bodies in the water utility. The 3rd position We've talked about our radio read water meters. We've been about 15 years converting our manual reads to touch reads. We've gotten to about 2/3 of the city, and now the technology's changed again. And so we want to realize this efficiency. We need to knock this out and get it done. So we're gonna hire a person, and the first conversions will be relatively simple because it's just replacing the touch read with a different solenoid up on top of it. And then we still have 1/3 of the city that we have to physically replace meters. So once these folks, finish the lead pipe, probably one of those individuals is gonna get reassigned into this water meter project. And I'm hoping in 2, no more than 3 years, we can convert all the meters in our city, and we'll achieve tremendous efficiency from the customer's standpoint. They're going to be able to real time see their water usage and if the meter's spinning from an app, and look at their water usage. And then we won't have anybody driving around 2 weeks a month reading water meters. And that position has a tremendous amount of turnover. So we're constantly having a second person, training this person. We get them trained, they're around for 3 to 6 months, they leave, we hire another one. So it's just a revolving door there, and we're gonna be able to step away from that.
Hey, Rob, how is the usage data captured by the city if somebody's not even driving by?
It's radio read. It's transmitting to us. It's real time and live all the time.
And so we will be able to receive all that data at the
Yes.
same time. Okay.
And bill from there.
Yep.
Yeah, all right.
And it goes right into our billing software, and it just completely automates the system.
It was a couple of work studies ago that the utility committee got a briefing from staff on these new meters, and they actually had them here on display, a couple were
Oh, that's right, on the cart.
parked there,
Yeah.
yeah. Those are the new meters.
I think they were either radio or Wi-Fi or a combination of both, I believe.
Get it. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah. So the two different things. The end goal is that we can read meters from City Hall without sending out crews.
Right.
The process is you'll need to send out crews to put on the adapter equipment that equips it for the radio signal, and then we are in a parallel effort going to be testing the connectivity at the different various locations where our towers are at, make sure that we can receive good signals from all our locations. So again, end goal is that we can read live from City Hall, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then our customers can also then create an account and see their own usage, make online modifications to, if they're leaving, to turn their water off, make all sorts of informational platforms for them to understand what's going on with their water usage. So we're not going to wait 2 months to see if there's a leak anymore. It's going to be known day of. We're going to have red flags, data coming in to our utility billing clerks to analyze.
You're right. There's some cellular dead spots, or
Yeah.
not great some places in the city, and we'll work through that. And there's a number of solutions for that, and we'll be working through that and testing it. By and large, the radio read is going to be some sort of a cellular communication piece.
And I think it's important to remember that the council's already adopted $500,000 for this effort in our current budget. So this is really the second piece, which is to add some personnel to go out and replace and move that forward even more. So we've got the equipment in the budget. That's great. Now we've got to get somebody out there actually replacing it and putting the radio heads in. So it's great effort, and long term, it's where the city needs to go. It's where a lot of our peers are at, and so we are lagging behind the times, but we'll catch up.
Thank you.
All right. Next position on there is a public works assistant. So at the front counter down at the Public Works Engineering, we have an office staff of 1. And so when that individual is at lunch, out sick or on vacation, Dennis or one of our engineers or one of our inspectors should be out doing field inspections is manning that front counter, and that is not an efficient use of our resources. Last 2 summers, we've had an intern assisting at the front counter, and the backlog of back work, in particular records, and cleaning out our, the fourth floor at City Hall, and digitizing all of that is a project that we're working towards, and having that second body will also assist us, in the digitizing our records. So that's a much needed position. The next two positions relate to front counter and permit intake over at Public Works, not Public Works, excuse me, the Department of Community Development. And so it's a permit to, we've added a bunch inspectors, and inspection services, but we've still got a backlog at the front counter in that data entry, and we don't see any end in the near future. So we're adding resources to the front counter there. And then the last item there you'll see is we're still in the process of our salary consultant and salary survey body of work, and it's not done yet. And this is just a placeholder for when that body's work is done. We'll bring the whole body of work to you, and that we've set aside resources to fund that when the time is appropriate. The only not funded list here at the bottom, I'm going to let Noah and John tackle the things that the Finance Committee did. Things that we didn't get in this budget would be, we'll talk to the first one because that did get funded by the Finance Committee. The set aside for Bay Street, we want to start saving for that road construction. Next week you'll see the design contract come forward, but we're still 2 or 3 years out, and that's a goal. We want to start setting some money aside as it becomes available, but we didn't achieve that goal in this budget. You're seeing the next three items are obligations that have been funded, should have been funded by our stormwater utility, and it just doesn't have sufficient resources to do that. And we got a presentation here a couple months ago on a stormwater comprehensive plan that's coming back to us probably around the end of the year, the first part of next year, and it has those three choices. And the only way we're going to solve it being able to properly fund its obligations is for us to act on that stormwater comprehensive plan, which involves capital facilities charges and some sort of a rate increase to that. Remember, all of our other utilities, we have gone to a CPI and an index, and it goes up every year. We haven't touched this stormwater utility in 10 years, and it doesn't have an index, so it's continuing to fall farther and farther behind. So as we touch this, that's also something else we should probably consider too, so that it doesn't fall behind again. The last two are just police vehicles, a public works vehicle. I'm not sure why that public works vehicle's on
Because
there.
there were three, there were three water public works personnel requested, and 2 are going to be teamed up doing the lead-based testing. So it was only 2 vehicles we needed, one for the commitment towards the meter program and the other for the lead testing.
Yep. And then the last one is just, we didn't recommend the third police officer, so we didn't need a third vehicle either. So with that, I will let Noah and John talk about the recommendations that came forward from the Finance Committee.
Let me start with one, and then Noah. Probably the one that we talked a lot about, and this was just the whole issue of funding our working capital policy that Noah talked about earlier, that our goal is to hit the 25%. And there was one.
And John, if I may, just so everyone's following along, it's going to be this blue page
this
just
blue
past
page.
the income statement in the packet. Sorry, it's
John, you don't have one because you brought
Yeah.
your packet from the Finance Committee, so I'll lend you mine.
Okay, great, thank you.
It's on the screen, and I'll try to zoom in a little bit more for you.
So
we got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did
it's, yeah, we got it.
We did.
It's
Should be in there.
after page 6.
Um,
concern that we raised was that in a lot of the funds that we have are utilities, for example, we're able to move the needle towards achieving that 25%, and we were not able to do that, at least in what was presented to us, in essentially the general fund. So we talked about it, and one of the other aspects that we looked at was we went through the sales tax report as we normally do every month. And Sean brought to our attention that although sales tax has slowed down, the last one is down, and then we also looked at REIT. But if we look at the amount of money that we are at for, say, 2023, we're actually ahead of what the budget had indicated. So the suggestion was to take a portion of that refunding and the sales tax revenue and fund that contribution towards achieving our 25% goal. So it brings all of our various contributions, whether it be from the various utilities or streets or whatever, to include the current expense and bring that up. So that was one of the big changes. The other that I guess I would just talk briefly on, and that was essentially there was a project that didn't quite make the deadline for submission to be considered, and that was a change to the design work necessary for the plaza that will be a part of the new community center. And Nick brought forward that we're at about a 30% design now. To bring that up to 100% design, we would need to add about $650,000 to the budget to be able to do that. And that could be funded through the Parks Impact fees. So it's essentially just allocating some of the park impact fees towards that effort of finishing the complete design for that public area. And then I'll let Noah speak to these others that we're just we're shuffling some things around to make sure that we are recognizing some of the contributions, as well as there was one, we talked quite a bit about the whole issue of our ending fund balances, if you go through that kind of detail. And we wanted to make sure that we are actually ahead of the game. We're spending a lot of funds, but we're doing a lot of projects. To the extent that I think we all have to recognize that we're pretty well maxed out of projects, that we need to kind of put a pause on anything new, and let's get some of the work that we have identified to date finished, which is, for a city of our size is quite impressive that we're going to be able to do these projects. But we have to recognize, and as the mayor pointed out, with some of these projects like the Public Works, we need to bring on some additional help to get it done. But that not only will complete the water meter project, for example, or the work that we need to do for determining whether we have lead pipes in the city, we can do those projects and still maintain what we do on a regular basis. So I think with that,
And I think, John, I just want to clarify, John, when John says we're maxed out, it's the human capital side of it.
Yeah,
We can't, from a capacity standpoint, we've got a lot
everybody's
of.
pretty busy.
Everybody's busy, that's right. Dennis?
It will be busy, so we need to kind of put a pause on new things so that we get these accomplished. And as I said, for a city of our size, we're doing a lot.
So before Dennis accepted the job, I took him around and drove him around, looked at all the projects and tried to freak him out, and it didn't work. So he still took the job.
Good, thank you.
So Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, to move, backing up just a little bit, you mentioned using part of the park impact fees to complete the designs
Yes.
process for the plaza. Are these previously collected park impact fees, or are we assuming fees that are going to be coming in the
Lion's
future?
share of what we have
90%
in
we
hand
already have.
today, there's the rate that we're bringing them in, though we'll have no problem with meeting this obligation.
We have 550 in the bank right now, and we're bringing in about 50,000 a month, and sometimes a big apartment project brings in $500,000 at once, but The,
Several of those in the works.
yeah, and this work won't start until after the first of the year, so we're confident that we'll have all of it in cash by the time we start the body of work.
And that
Thank you.
portion of the project is going to be essentially a park.
Why is that item there twice, or why is it not worded differently? It looks like they're identical for 650 twice.
111 and
Well,
2.
One's a transfer in and the other is a transfer out.
So it's-
basically.
see-
So one
see-
should be negative, or one should be?
Yeah, one's bringing the money in and the other one's allowing us to spend it.
It's taking the money from the park impact fee, authorizing it, and then putting it in the capital construction account so we can spend it.
Yeah, I could do that a little differently. Had a short window between finance
Yeah.
committee and
You had
study
about an
session
hour
to
to
capture
get
all
this
this.
page
So
prepared.
that might be
I
an
can see
error there.
copy paste too, it's like.
Yeah, that's very possible, but when we actually do it, we're gonna make sure we got the GL detail to balance. And I think I would like to turn this over to Sean to talk a little bit about the Community Events Center proposal.
Yeah, so, you want me to touch on the LTAC as well?
That's the one I'm talking about, yeah,
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
Not the community events, just the LTAC?
The full,
The fund is called Community Events.
Okay, so as you're aware, last week, the LTAC committee got together and met. We have a lot of requests this year, kind of a lot, very similar to last year. And last year, if you remember, while we budgeted $100,000, we ended up expending about $123,000. And just kind of the way things are looking, we've heard from every applicant except one. We have another meeting at the end of the month. And it's looking like we're probably going to end up allocating similar amount to last year, kind of that 125 amount where we budgeted 100. The good news is the way we're pacing on collections this year is about $165,000, so it's completely cash flowed. And so I think it's appropriate, just, we're living in different worlds. We've been budgeting $100,000 for a long, long time, and our proceeds are up, and so I think our allocation should follow that a little bit. And so I think it just makes sense that we don't have to touch this twice to go ahead and increase for 2023 up to $125,000. So that was added. Recommendation to the finance committee was to take that up to a 125.
yeah, and just for clarity, that was for 2024, correct?
2024 expenditure, yeah, yes,
Yep.
I'm sorry, 2024. We're hearing the application process now, but the expenditure would be in 2024.
Are more of the revenues coming from the Airbnb type lodging as opposed to the comfort?
It adds to it, it certainly adds to it. I mean, we have actually a Airbnb on our committee this year, which is kind of neat.
Is the percentage higher from that sector?
I think it's a couple of things. I think that the average room night, whether it's an Airbnb or a hotel, is up, right? And so when you're dealing with a flat margin of tax on a higher per night rate, your revenues increase.
Can I get clarification on Airbnb versus B&B? Are you talking about bed tax on anybody's Airbnb and the city collects that?
Yes.
Okay.
And by Airbnb, it could be VRBO or Evolve
Right,
or any
right.
of these
All the
other.
short term,
Yeah.
yeah.
Short-term rentals, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so with that, it's always kind of confusing because right now, if you were to look at the current fund balance in that account, right, it looks higher than it really is because we've obligated some of that to the community center, number one. Number two, the people that receive funds in 2023 this year haven't yet filed for reimbursement. So there's not as much funds in there as what you might think, but we're going to do a true up and probably bring back to the council and ask for an additional obligation of surplus funds. Is it there? She already did it. Thank you, Noah. Of $35,000 to go ahead and obligate that to operations of the community center. We want to start pre-funding for that community center. As we know, as we start this business up, we're probably going to be hiring staff in advance of the thing opening, and your first couple of years operations, it'll be nice to have kind of some pre-funding for that. So I think it's a kind of a common theme of what we've heard tonight of a lot of these things is we're calling expenses. They're really not expenses. We're just allocating them to savings. And I think it's just a great fiscal policy.
John, is there a date on when folks that get the LTAC funds have to have their request for
Reimbursement?
reimbursement?
There is, that it typically bleeds into first quarter of the following year. A lot of these events occur late in the fall. By the time they get all their reconciliation, fill out the reports, a lot of times it'll go into the next fiscal year.
You're referring about somebody that has an allocation and is seeking reimbursement? Are you referring
Yep.
to, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, that was the correct answer. All right, Noah, what else, you got anything else to cover on this?
So the other one that I would cover, because I think Sean and John did a great job on the other two, is they requested that we increase our real estate excise tax. So again, similar to the sales tax, we looked at what we budgeted, and we are already proposing to increase our budgeted revenue for REIT 1 and 2 in order to make our debt service payments for the City Hall project in 2024. And looking at the collected REIT revenue, we've already met our current biennial budget of 1.6 million. And so part of the proposal was to increase an additional $200,000 for 2023 only and allocate $100,000 of that towards the pre-funding of the City Hall debt service payment. So initially I said we don't have enough to get us all the way there. The Finance Committee had recommended we allocate another $100,000 to get us closer. Again, it won't get us all there, but it's another $100,000 towards the pre-funded debt service payments. Then again, we can look at this again next year to see how well we're performing, if there's additional monies available. That's what you see here with your REIT Fund 109 and then your Fund 206.
Questions on this, and before we move on to, are you going to do the capital projects next, Noah, or the fund balances?
Oh, let's go through the capital projects. I think that's a good refresher for everybody, and then we'll end on kind of the overall picture of including all these changes. What does it mean to the financial status of the city? So in your packets, you have a green handout right here. So what I wanted to do is put forward a full picture of our capital projects, and we talk about how many capital projects we have going on. So if you turn to page, if I can. Okay, it's locking on me. But if you turn to page 2, you'll see in total, currently we have a budget with $50,691,000 of capital projects appropriated. With the proposed mid-year amendments, that number would increase to $57,868,000. You can see each of the funds here, 302, 304, 413, 423, and 433, and their appropriate changes. So if you turn to page 3, this details all the capital projects that are currently budgeted out of 302, plus the additions that we talked about today. Of note, if it's highlighted in green, that means that's an entirely new project. If just the dollars are in green but the words are black, that means that we just added additional dollars to that project. But it was originally planned and budgeted. So you can see for the 302 capital construction, we have the office building and parking for $2 million added to our original budget, which puts us at a roughly $15.2 million capital general fund budget. Again, a lot of these projects we are in the process of working on or have complete, like the splash pad, charging stations all complete, storm complete, City Hall remodel, we are underway. When we look at our street capital, again, I just want to point this out for the public. I think it's always important to remind everybody all the projects that we do have going on. We have $14,500,000 with this amended budget. You'll see the Safe Routes to School design work of $235,000. I want to point out tip 1.16. Again, the words are in black, meaning it was originally part of our budget, and we are adding additional funding to that project. So that brings us up to 1.3 million.
That's the Bay Street design.
Then we have the Tremont Phase 2 design work for $732,000. I think it's important to note, especially for the public, that that's 100% grant funded. We have the TIP 1.19 SB 160 2A design work for a total of $600,000. And then TIP 1.8, 1.9 Salmonberry Blueberry, that project, again, this addition of $97,000 is developer funded for a design. And that was an amendment that the council approved about a month ago. But in total, you can see that we have $14.5 million of capital projects planned for our street program. When we look at the water capital program, $10.5 million planned. Of course, the big one is well 11 there with $8.6 million, but that was part of our original budget. Of the new budget, we have a well 7 pre-construction design, which will have a loan with it. Low rate loan, quick payback. I think it's a 5-year payback on that one. You can see here that we are defunding the low pressure project, the 390. And we also have in this budget, originally you can see it was originally $650,000 was the loan amount. And we've drawn on that loan by about $12,000. So we will defund the remaining amount, and we're actually planning on paying that loan off. It does not make financial sense to carry that loan for the next 10 years at $12,000. So that is baked into our budget proposals. And then we have the water addition for Pottery Avenue. Storm went blank, but on the next page, Storm Capital, there are no changes to the Storm Capital program at this time. We already completed the purchase, and those are just annual contributions to the storm, but that totals $800,000. Then the last page, wow. The last page is for the sewer capital construction program. We are adding, again, additional funding, roughly $352,000 to that South Sydney Ruby Creek design work, moving it from 30% design to 100% design. And we have a new project, Pottery Avenue sewer work. Then we have the Bay Street lift station design, $4 million, of which $150,000 is grant funded. The other $850,000 is a loan. So I want to go back to the front page, assuming these pages are going to pull open for me. And again, I just think this is a good reminder to show the public all the work that the council has appropriated for our capital program. Roughly $60 million is a lot of work on the human resource side, debt side, and management side for our city.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
So now we come to
Any questions about the capital, existing, or what we're funding going forward?
Make one statement before he gets into kind of the fund balances, because I think this is relevant, is you can see that we're doing a lot, and I think it's, Mayor mentioned in our Finance Committee meeting today, I think it was really relevant that, you know, these are city funds and they should be deployed. And so we're doing a lot of projects, but at the same time, as we listen tonight, all of the things we're doing to pre-fund debt obligations, to increase reserves, to increase stabilization. I mean, we're really in a very healthy place, which allows us to make the decisions we're making today. And you'll see that even with all of these changes, that the city is in really good health, and our ending fund balance as a whole is actually growing, which is good to see. So just wanted to make that comment to kind of frame it all in, that sometimes we get caught up on expenses, but with the way the accounting works, a lot of these expenses are really just, you know, increasing prepayment opportunities and really savings accounts.
Yeah, and I just think it's important too. We've got a lot of development activity going on, but there's a lot of nonsense, and particularly on social media, that the city's infrastructure is inadequate and that it has all kinds of deficiencies. We couldn't issue a single building permit if there wasn't sewer or water capacity. And this presentation clearly demonstrates we're making significant investments so that we can serve our community into the future. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. The one glaring problem we have, and it's just timing, our road, you know, the congestion and traffic. We can't, you know, we have capital facilities charges and ability and other means to fund sewer and water improvements, but the roads, the tool that the legislature has given us to fund capacity is traffic impact fees. And we have one of the largest traffic impact fees in the region. But we can't collect that impact fee until a building permit is issued. So it's a bit backwards, but that's what the state has provided us as a tool. So unfortunately, we have to accept that growth, save enough of those dollars, and then build the capacity improvements. Because it's not, the growth needs to pay for growth, and it is, but our existing deficiencies need to be paid for by our community, all of us that already live here. And so, you know, anyway, I just want to point out, we are investing in our community, we are investing in our infrastructure, and we got a heck of a lot going on. And I'm proud of the work that our team is doing. John?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that, and I think one of the real important pieces that we all need to recognize, and Sean touched on it, and I want to make sure that it doesn't go without additional comments, and the fact that we're able to do what we're doing, yet still fund these reserves. You know, we established a number of years ago what these reserves are being, and as Noah suggests, our goal is 25%. That's pretty aggressive to do it in 1 year, but we have every year been contributing towards that to where now, you said 17.5% towards that. So while we're doing all of these projects, we're still able to do those projects and continue to fund the reserves. And I know the mayor and I had a conversation after the finance committee on the way back. You know, he and I can remember 15 years ago when it was extremely challenging to get the budget to just balance out. And today it's such a much better picture. And another comment that I would share, Noah, if you could, in some of the conversations that the mayor and Noah's had with the bonding folks, and how pleased they were recognizing that unlike a lot of cities, that we're doing some of these things like funding the first year's payments before they're due and having our reserves in place, things of that nature. We haven't seen the bond rating yet, but my expectation is that they're going to be better than the normal, simply because we're already proactively taking these steps to be in a very good financial position, even considering all of these projects that we have on our table today, so.
Thank you for that, John. Noah, you want to dive into the fund balances?
Yeah, so now we're going to the income statement, which kind of pulls all these adjustments together in a single look to see how it is impacted by fund and the overall impact to the city. So I think I'm going to focus on mainly the operating funds. Again, this is all material for you to take home, absorb, and come back with questions if there's anything concerning. But overall, we're increasing our expenditure appropriation by $15 million. But as we've talked, we still have healthy ending fund balances at the city overall.
And I think it's important too, we touched on this at the finance, that box there where the appropriation summary. Our city, with our enterprise funds and the capital projects that we're doing, it's a $240 million operation over this biennium. That is, it's huge. It's just huge.
So a very important fund to the city is our current expense fund, our general fund. And what you have here in the first column is our current budget with all the amendments, which shows a beginning fund balance of $14 million, some revenues, some expenses, and we're spending down and having a current budget ending at $5 million. With the proposed adjustments, both in revenue and expenses, after this amendment, we would end with roughly $2.4 million of fund balance, which is, again, meeting our minimum working capital target. And with the adjustments that the Finance Committee, which is not reflected yet, which they propose, we would add $300,000 to that ending fund balance, which would kind of move the needle towards our 25% goal. So the ending fund balance is good. It's above our minimum, and as we add more revenue to it, it continues to approach our 25% goal. Our street fund is also very healthy at $2 million. It has its working capital minimum and additional resources to fund its streets operations. And as you go through here, I'll point out one other fund, the stabilization fund, 003. Again, this is the stabilization fund for our current expense and street fund, which we categorize as the general fund. and it is meeting its goal, and we are contributing to it. So that is fantastic. Again, keep hitting on these points about our stabilization and our fiscal conservative policies, while still building, hiring, and doing more work for the citizens. The only fund on here that I just want to touch, and the mayor has talked about this a little bit, is Fund 421, our entire storm enterprise fund. Again, we couldn't achieve all the goals that we set out as far as working capital, stabilization.
On page 5 of your packet.
There we go. So we aren't able to, in this amendment, to fully get to our goal for not stabilization, but our working capital and contribute to stabilization. But we do want to point out that the fund still is relatively healthy. It's still above its minimum. It's just closer to that 12.5% than it is the 17. And the storm actually does have a healthy stabilization at $543,000. So overall, we're still really good. We just aren't able to take the kind of steps we want to at this moment in time with our storm fund.
Mayor, if I may, that's one thing that we talked about at the Finance Committee in regards to the stormwater utility is that as we were chatting about, you know, the capital program for the stormwater, and that's usually, I mean, the whole utility is covered by rates. So next year, we're going to have to be talking about rates for the stormwater system, whether we want to be very conservative, the middle of the road, or very aggressive, and, you know, improvements to the stormwater system. But that will change with whatever happens with that discussion that's going to occur next year.
I do want to mention you guys also have additional detail in the back there. You're welcome to take that home and go through it and ask any questions you have. Again, the plan is to bring the budget ordinance forward next Tuesday at council meeting for adoption. I have the adjustments proposed by the Finance Committee. So we can open it up for further discussion for the full council. Or I just do have a few other comments. I did want to circle back on the ratings and all that.
On page 6 of this presentation too, I want to point out the contribution we're making to the equipment replacement and revolving fund. We're funding $1.7 million to future equipment purchases in this budget too. So we're recognizing that things are getting more expensive and that we've got equipment we need to replace in the future. So and making a significant contribution. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, and I think this, I mean, this is something to really be proud of as a council. For me, the highlights of these budget amendments are that you're fully funding your ER&R, you're fully funding your stabilization accounts, you're increasing towards your working 25% goal for working capital, you're fully funding pre-debt service payments except for one, which we're going to continue to work on. You're investing in your police department, you're investing in your public works department, you're investing in a water meter program that's going to make us more efficient, provide better customer service. You're investing in your DCD department on the front end to take in more permits to help the machine to continue to operate and grow. And all these factors really speak to the work that we've done over the last 6 years to create a city that's stable, it has security, it has reserves. If there's a downturn in revenues, we have things already in place. We've been very thoughtful, looking forward, and taking advantage of the windfall of funds that we've had over the last couple of years. It's been a good time in the city as far as revenue and permit revenue and sales tax growth, and we continually set aside funds to address our ongoing needs and continue to fund those kind of reserve accounts. And I think that message was a big part of what I was trying to promote when we met with the rating agencies last week. We should have our rating tomorrow, so that'll be really exciting. It was a really productive meeting, and the feedback that we got is that the things that are in the city's control, we did really well on. A part of the rating, there are certain things that are outside of our control in how they evaluate and rate in their criteria. But the things that are in our control, we scored really well. So again, that speaks to all the work that we've done over the last 6 years to put these stabilization funds in place, these working capital, to fully fund our E&R, to use one-time revenue for one-time expenses, to get a lot of grant money, and now fully funding our debt service payments, we have really put the city on a path for success financially if there's any risk in downturn in our economy. So good job to the council and all the work you do.
Yeah, and you know, some of those things that we can't control. We don't control what the median house price is, what the median income is in our community. There's things that they are what they are, and you know, that play a factor into this also. But as Noah said, the things that we do control, we scored very well on.
Can't control the treasury rates?
No, we can't control that either.
That's what out of our control.
Yes, yes. So, any questions, any more materials you want to present, Noah?
No, I think maybe we turn it over to if there's no more discussion, we turn over to any questions from the public as part of the public hearing?
Yes, so we are conducting a public hearing, and the questions from the council first before I open up to the
Yeah,
public.
can you just remind me about the fund? I guess it's the social services fund. You said it's 60,000 a year. That
It's
is it
the four-
460?
$1,406.
1406. Okay.
Yeah, and it's for affordable housing, and we.
It's based on sales tax, right? So it may fluctuate.
I don't believe it does. It was, when the legislation was passed, the amount we get was fixed and capped. It won't grow, but yeah, we get roughly $60,000 each year from it. And you know, we're patiently waiting for some service providers to open their doors, and we want to help. And in the meantime, I think it's important to also try to keep members of our community in their homes so that they don't become homeless.
That's the big lift right there. That's the key.
And we're not spending all of it. But we're you know, I asked for what housing, these projects have to be in the city of Port Orchard, and they have to be low-income families or households.
Do we have a limit per account that, I mean, if someone asked for a $17,000 windows, heating, you know,
So
and they needed it,
I will run through,
do you
so
have a cap?
there's 5 projects, $8,800, $7,900, $6,500, $5,500. The most expensive one includes a heating system and 11 windows for $14,000.
When you said that those had to be provided within city limits, it made me wonder if we should think about trying to lobby for a change so that it's within city limits or associated UGAs.
The county has its own pot of dollars, and the UGA's in the county.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about the Mile Hill Shelter specifically. And I don't want to have the city precluded from being able to use or support that.
That's a
Good
good
point.
point when Bremerton's talking about putting all their people from their, into that shelter from the one.
There isn't capacity,
Yeah.
simply. And yeah, they're talking about a shelter that they're going to build with their resources. But the county also is collecting the 1/10
Yeah.
sales tax measure that, from our residents, that they can use for that shelter too. So with that, Janine, is anybody online that use the raise your hand feature if you would like to testify on the budget matter before us this evening? We have no one in the chambers, so is there anyone there, Janine?
We do have 2 people online. They have not yet raised their hands.
So at this time, if you would like to testify, please raise your hand. I'll give you just another moment.
No
Right.
hands have been raised.
All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. We will hold a second public hearing next Tuesday on this same matter, and look forward to public providing us feedback. So with that, our meeting is adjourned.
Good work. Thank you.
Good job, Noah.
Not having that, this is mine. There's mine. Non-